You're listening to Power Pearls Podcast, where it's all about empowering your knits and pearls with business and life coach Kara Gott Warner and creator of the Intuitive Knitter e-courses and the Rock Your Shop coaching program.
Well, hello there. I want to tell you a little bit about a special project that I've been collaborating on over the past year, and that is the creation of the Knitter's Planner, a planning system created for knitters. I teamed up with Stephanie Palmer, the creator of the Quilter's Planner, who is a passionate quilter and knitter, and she noticed that there wasn't a planner out there, especially for knitters. So the stars aligned and Stephanie and I teamed up to create this special planner just for you. The Knitter's Planner has all that you would expect in a paper planner. Plus, we've added some custom elements such as your ability to select a Sunday or Monday start of your week, a vertical or horizontal weekly layout, or you can ditch the weekly spreads and load up on graph or dot paper. And of course, you get a monthly calendar for every month of the year. So you can pre-order your planner now by going to karagottwarner.com/Knitter's Planner. Hey there, Power Pearlers. Welcome to another episode. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Jeanne Packer, who is the president of Battenkill Fibers Carding and Spinning Mill. This is a fiber processing mill located in Greenwich, New York. And Jeanne founded the mill in 2009 and provides custom carding and spinning services for fiber farms and to manufacture yarn and fiber products for indie designers, wholesale and retail markets. The mill produces 100 to 150 pounds of artisan quality semi-worsted spun yarn daily. And she's basically the mill uses refurbished traditional milling machinery. And by the way, Jeanne is also the co-founder of the nonprofit Hudson Valley Textile Project, which connects farmers, makers, and designers. And her work with that sustainable textile initiative led her to being featured in the spring 2019 edition of Where Women Create. And if that wasn't enough, by the way, she lives on a working maple syrup farm with her partner, has 7 adult children and several grandchildren. She enjoys gardening, knitting, yoga, walking, and snowshoeing. So, Jeanne, I want to thank you for joining me today on Power Pearls Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's fun already.
Oh, yeah. So I shared a little intro about you, and hopefully I got all the little details right, because there's so much more to your story, because you have an impressive background in the needle arts world and the yarn world. So this is why I was so excited to have you on, because we met already. So we go back a little bit because we met at TNNA, but I'm excited to have you on the show for the first time. And I was thrilled that you said yes. And so my intro just scratched the tip of the surface. So I would love it if you could take a few minutes to share a bit more about yourself, your business, and your overall vision. Does that sound good?
Perfect.
All right, go for it.
Well, I think we should go back a little further than 2009.
Okay.
I think maybe we should go back to 1950 something and talk about me as a little girl, because I'm a firm believer that who you are and what you're doing when you're 5 years old indicates what you'll be doing for the rest of your life. And I challenge you and everyone listening to just pause a minute and think about what you were doing when you were 5 and see how that really does apply today. And also take a look at what your kids were doing and when they were 5, and now look at who they've become. And you can see it, sure enough. So back in the 50s, I was the only child of older parents. They were very busy with their careers and left me to my own devices quite a bit. I discovered knitting. My mom did not knit, so I'm self-taught. I just had a pattern book and some needles, and the first thing I made had increases, decreases, I-cord, and cable, and I was 5 years old.
Oh my
But I
gosh.
looked at the pictures, I read the instructions, and I made it. It was a little kerchief from the Burnett book. It was, of course, in black and white, and I still have it here somewhere.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. So I was thinking about that. So what I was doing when I was 5. So I did not learn how to knit until I was about 12. But I don't know why this is really funny, and I don't know if you remember these, but what came to mind were these little things. They called them color forms. I don't know if you ever, if you,
Yeah, oh sure. There was somebody named Wendy maybe involved with it. You dressed her. She had a
yeah,
raincoat and an umbrella and boots and so on.
uh-huh.
And it was, yeah, oh yeah.
And I would play with those for hours and hours. And, in my 5-year-old mind, it was like, I was like making something new every time. Like, what kind of combination can I come up with? So I was always in that mindset of like, I was just hungry to make things, And so thanks for kind of putting that little seed into our minds to talk about what it was like when we were 5 and what we were thinking about, because that really does shape so much about our lives. So yeah, keep on going through this timeline of your life.
Uh, so textiles just kept becoming a bigger and bigger part. By the time I was 10, I had added fabric and sewing for myself, sewing for my friends, home decor. By the time I went to college, I had added embroidery and crewel work for myself and for my friends. And always along the way, at each of these ages, there was something to do with keeping track of numbers and math, how things worked, and taking a leadership role in all the different team sports or Girl Scout camp or whatever. So easily by the time I was in my 20s, I was set up to be owning a business where you had to do something with engineering and mathematics and related to textiles. I mean, it was all set into place even then.
So back then, that's kind of where it all started. So how did you get to where you are today? I mean, before Battenkill Fibers, you owned a yarn shop, right? I mean, you really have, this has been a big part of your life for so long. I mean, really, I would say that you're like a veteran in this needle arts world. So do you want to kind of keep going with that little story there, and what kind of led you to where you are today?
Sure. Oh, yes. So I let knitting lapse when I was raising my kids and only made like dishcloths and maybe one sweater and one pair of socks a year, not the 10 things on needles that I have today. And I also had I had started a consulting firm almost 30 years ago now and traveled a lot. So socks were great on an airplane, but I was really about raising the kids and managing the busy consulting group. But 9/11 really caused me and a lot of others who were on the road a lot to think about what it had meant to be in an airplane that day and in future days. And I really needed to find solace in something. And some people, you hear all the stories of they called a lost relative or they went to a church they hadn't been to. Well, I went to a yarn store and I just got totally enthralled again with the new knitting. That's right at the peak of the fun fur craze, and I'll admit to making a few of those. But at any rate, I really became totally reconnected and gained a lot of solace from my knitting. And when I moved to the Watkins Glen, New York area in 2005 and discovered they didn't have a yarn store there, I was devastated because it was way more than the materials. It was the people. A yarn store had become my family and my community. I had found my people. And so because I knew how to start businesses, I decided, well, I'll just build a yarn store in Watkins Glen, New York, because they obviously need one. I did.
Yeah, and you
The
needed
people
one
who
too.
came were,
Sorry, I cut you
yeah,
off.
I needed one.
You needed
That's
one
all right.
too.
I needed one. So I needed a yarn store, so I built one. The people who came were from all over the country because Watkins Glen is a tourist attracting area. And all I kept hearing from the people who came is, well, is this made locally? What do you have that's local? What can we get that reminds us of just Watkins Glen? Who are the farmers? Where did this come from? So this barrage of questions. And that led me to do two things. One was to start offering some guided tours of the area's farms and other fiber things. Sort of like the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York is known for its wine tours and wine tasting. So I kind of modeled the tours to farms and natural fibers, dyeing classes. And some of the girls that travel with me now came to that very first tour and have been on my mailing list ever since. So almost 15 years of traveling together. So that was the first thing I did. But the second thing was bigger. And I said, geez, we need a way of making these connections. There's all these farms that I'm now becoming aware of. And there's all these people who want to connect to the local farm. And I looked at what was available. We'd go to Rhinebeck or the Finger Lakes Fiber Festival. And a lot of the yarn that farmers had available wasn't really the quality that the knitting community was interested in. There were knots in the skeins. They wasn't labeled in a way that they could understand the yardage. It wasn't necessarily one of the weights like DK or fingering that a knitter wanted. There was sort of this disconnect, even when there was a venue for farmers to offer their materials and for knitters to obtain them. So I just saw this like glaring gap in the supply chain and said, I've got to do something about this. So sort of like I got to do something about, we need a yarn store in Watkins Glen. I said, I got to do something about this gap in the Northeast in the supply chain to help farmers and also to help the knitters who want something authentic.
Yeah. And it's also right. It's that word authentic, because you filled a need, you saw the gap, and then you connected the community and supported those farmers, so supporting on the local level, instead of, okay, the only option is like the big guys, the big companies, the manufacturers, and it's like, I think that sustainability really does play a part too. I mean, like how do you, well, we can talk about some of the initiatives that you're involved in, but that, would you say that you also are able to create a very sustainable business because of the way that you conduct, how you run the mill?
The business is definitely sustainable, and that's all under the heading of you reap what you sow. If you take good care of your customers will not only keep coming back to you, but they'll tell other people about you. We do really no advertising at all. All of our business comes from referrals and just people hearing about us. I guess we go to a few fiber festivals as a way of meeting customers and picking up their wool, especially folks from Maryland and South, where they really don't have other options and it's expensive to ship. So we do take a truck down to Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival so that we can bring home their wool to make into yarn.
So I want you to share a little bit about like sort of what a day in a life at the mill looks like, because just to give the listeners a little bit more of an idea, like what you do from the time, like do farmers drop off their fleece and then you spin it and then you deliver it? Like, how does that whole thing work? I read an article about you in Where Women Create. I don't know if that's out yet. I'm guessing that it was out in the spring of this year, but it's it's such a great story about exactly what it is that you do, but can you also explain like what happens from the moment the process begins?
So there's like two things we need to talk about here, and one is the customers, and one is what we do for the customers. We have three kinds of customers, and a day in the life of Battenkill Fibers might involve dealing with all three kinds of customers. We have farmers now from an ever widening circle, in general, 300 or 400 miles from upstate New York, but also depending on the breed of sheep from all over the country. And these farmers have anywhere from 10 pounds to 1,000 pounds of greasy, dirty wool that they want scoured, carded, spun, plied into yarn and sent back to them on cones or skeins that they will then sell themselves through some market, through their on-farm sales, their Etsy shop, their going to a fiber festival, a farmer's market, and that's up to them. Also, in the course of a day, one or more indie dyers will be on our doorstep or in our inbox. And that's the biggest change in the business model from 10 years ago when I was starting the company. I didn't even really know there was a category of customer called indie dyer, and now it accounts for a third of our business.
Oh, wow.
We've met some absolutely fabulous talent and dear people along the way. I'm sure we have some show notes coming up, and when we do, I'd love to link to a few of them, including Am at Oysters and Pearls.
Sure.
And Birch Hollow Fibers, Wobble Gobble. They're just beautiful designs and the beautiful colors. And I'd really like to showcase these gals and what they're doing, especially their commitment to regionally sourced and locally processed materials. And that's just so refreshing. From 10 years ago, what few indie dyers I knew of were all working on the same 2 or 3 bases that were sourced and processed overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just fabulous to see these folks who are making the investment in these materials. And then the third call of the day, or the third set of emails of the day, will come from yarn companies. So that may be a brand like Quince & Co. We spin their stone wool Romney and their stone wool American Corriedale, or it may be from yarn companies as in yarn stores like Cornwall Yarn Shop or Common Thread in Saratoga, stores here in the Hudson Valley, who again have customers who are looking for something very local, very custom. We're spinning a fabulous line of yarns for Brooklyn General Store, and of course the Hudson Valley includes the 5 boroughs.
Oh, wow. So, this is great. I love that you're talking about this because I feel like you're doing such an amazing public service as far as this local and, making sure that yarns are, you're providing a service or a way to connect the local and regional companies. And, as far as, the bigger overseas companies, I mean, I'm not going to tiptoe around this, but the problem with mulesing and ill treatment to sheep and just the processing in general. And so with what you're doing is really helping to avoid that. And so I celebrate that. And thank you so much for doing what you do with your company.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's not always easy, and it's not always cheap, because the farmers who are managing smaller flocks in a very ethical, very compassionate way need to be compensated for that. So the price of yarn that comes from a mill like ours, where the farmers are paid a fair price for the wool and the employees are paid a living wage, immediately makes the resulting product more expensive than if it had come from a more mass-produced setting.
If you're struggling with your fiber business or yarn shop and you need some direction, then let's set up a free 30-minute coaching session so you can get some clarity on your goals. You'll also get a taste of what it's like to work with me in a more formal way, and I'll share more details about my Rock Your Shop coaching program, which will help you get more peeps in your LYS or online shop. So let's set up a time together and let's crush your goals. Go to karagottwarner.com/coach with Kara. Yeah, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you a little bit. I guess maybe you answered some of this. So if I were a designer, and let's say I wanted to create my own indie yarn line, and I came to you and I said, I would love to do this. So how would you go about working with someone like that might want to kind of open the conversation about what they would need to do to get started doing that with you?
It's so super easy. I've done it now with a few folks. We're still in development, so I'm not going to talk about brand names here quite yet. But several fledgling designer yarn company combos have come and said we really want to make a yarn or two it's totally local, where we can meet the farmers, where we could send a film crew to the farm and go that far down the supply chain of chain of custody of the materials, the whole way from the shearing to the yarn shop. And so the first step is for me to see what their interest is in a yarn. Are they shawl knitters, sock knitters? Do they want to mainly offer sweaters? Are they looking for something with a little elegance? Or did they come to me because they wanted a little artisan, a little crafty, crunchy? And because we spin semi-worsted, we can make a very smooth yarn, especially with long staple fibers like mohair and alpaca, as well as the long wools, Romney, Teeswater, Wensleydale, Cotswold. And so there's a lot of potential for designers and yarn companies who want to work with us on all the way to a breed specific weight, specific ply. And so once we have a conversation about what it is they're looking for, is their aesthetic boxy? Is their aesthetic drapey in a garment? Are they mainly interested in home decor? And we do get quite a few of them as well who want a line of bed linens, blankets, skirts, table runners, those kinds of things. Once we hear what they're looking to make, we can help advise them on the best wool to choose, or other fibers, the best weights, twists, and plies of yarn. And then we just make some small run samples, and they can send that to their test knitters, test weavers, whatever they're doing with it next, and evaluate that before we launch into a big batch.
Wow, that's so cool. So what would be a commitment for, like, let's say, I know some bigger companies, it's easy for them to probably come, meet your minimums, but for someone that's really small and just starting out, what would it be like? How would you work out the minimums with a smaller designer?
Well, our logistics at the mill, and people see this once they come to visit and understand that while it sounds like a lot, they're really on the hook for 10 pounds of finished yarn, that we just can't even launch an R&D project for less than that. And so there's the potential of someone investing $300 or $400 in a startup and not really liking the results they get, and needing to sell that and just as is to a third party and then try again on a different tack. That's why we do quite a lot of consulting before we even run those first 10
Oh,
pounds.
sure.
And that way, we don't often have someone who hates their first 10 pounds. We've certainly got people who say, yes, thanks, now let's.
Mm-hmm.
And then they modify from there. But we certainly would never make even the first 10 pounds so they were hideous, but they often do point to modifications that need to be done.
Sure. I mean, and you mentioned that you would do a small run of samples anyway. So you're consulting and you're creating samples so that the customer feels really confident about the finished product. So yeah, that's great. I mean, because I know that there are listeners probably that could be interested in something like that. So I just wanted to ask you to kind of elaborate on what that would be like for, just sort of a small indie company. But this would apply to anyone. So thank you for sharing that.
And with the indie dyers, one thing that we have, we can always just send out a skein or a half a skein of something that's similar to what they have in mind. So we get this quite a bit. Someone wants 2-ply DK weight in a long wool merino blend with a loose twist. Well, we might have 2-ply sport in a Romney merino blend with a loose twist, and we can send them a skein of that. Or we might have on hand a 3-ply instead of a 2-ply, or we might have it with a tighter twist. But by being able to give them something that meets 3 out of the 4 of their criteria, they can at least begin to see how that's going to take dye or how that's going to work in their looms or on their knitting machines, and then be able to say, well, gee, if we could just tighten that a little bit, or if we make it just a little heavier. And so that's also a really good starting point where there's not even a 10 pound investment, where there's a 1 skein investment to start experimenting with just something similar that we happen to have on hand.
Yeah. So you offer, speaking of indie dyers, so you have a dyeing studio and you dyed, you can dye the wool, you dyed in the wool. Is that like a phrase? Kettle dyeing and hand painted. So you do all of those services. Is that correct?
We do offer all those services, and it's mainly our farm customers that take us up on that. And that works great. There's a Lincoln Longwool farm up in northern Vermont that just sent us their whole clip of close to 400 pounds, and Lincoln comes in white and gray. But they also work with a number of weavers in Vermont, and the weavers want to work with more than white and gray. So we've been able to make them 3 natural colors, which is white and light gray and gray. And we get to that light gray by just blending some of the white with some of the gray. And then we can take those 3 colors and once they're spun into yarn, dye them for 4 colors times 3. So now they have a range of 12 colors to offer the weavers that they work with.
Wow. Exciting. I love it. Okay. So let's switch gears again because I want to talk about the Hudson Valley Textile Project. This is an initiative that you've been part of for a few years now. And it kind of ties back into the local farmers and all the sustainability stuff that we were talking about. So can you share a little bit about this, the purpose behind this initiative?
Well, I love talking about the Hudson Valley Textile Project. I think those were the first words out of my mouth when I met you. And in fact, I met you because of my co-founder, my partner in crime, Gail Parinello, who is the owner of Cornwall Yarn Shop in Cornwall, New York. And the Hudson Valley Textile Project really began right after the mill began with that call from Gail, who said, hi, I own a yarn store and I want some local yarn. And I was thinking, what better way to get it than to call a mill that happens to be in the Hudson Valley, just like my store. Do you have anything you can send me? And that's where it was born, right there, because then we met after our first few batches of yarn and really started talking about what was she hearing from her hand knitting customers, what were they looking for, what did I know about the farms, and how could I match up what was available, readily available to me, because there's a markup there in that whole keystoning of yarn stores. There's another step there. I'm now selling to Gail, who needs to make a living as well and needs to also keep it affordable for her customers. So we had to look at what was how could we help the farmers by taking some materials that mightn't have brought them a lot of money otherwise. So that's how it all started. And Gail and I just talked more and more about this and decided about 5 years ago, well, we ought to get together with a couple other people we knew who shared some of these ideas with us. And we had a breakfast in New Paltz at the diner, the official headquarters of the Hudson Valley Textile Project. Started reaching out to people that Gail knew that were interested, people that I knew that were interested. Pretty soon we had a sort of working committee. We held a summit to try to identify what were the issues and opportunities in a farm to fabric supply chain. We thought maybe the 6 of us who ate at the diner and another 6 or 8 people might come. There was only room for 50 in the building, and that's how we had to cut the guest list. 2 years ago, we switched the summit to a new location. In that building, there's only room for 85, and we outgrew that space last year. There was standing room only, so we're going to have to grow the summit next year, even to a larger location. So it's fabulous, the interest all through the supply chain. It's not just the brands or the designers, it's the individual makers, the farmers, it's economic development organizations. We had a representative of the state senator for New Paltz sent her ag policy person to join us. It's just gaining that much interest and attention.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, when you first mentioned this to me, I was so thrilled because, well, I'm so about like just really being connected to what is it that, what can we do on the local level, on the grassroots level, and just what you're doing, in the Hudson Valley is just. It's just amazing. So like right now, like what is it that you and Gail are working on? Like what is the big vision right now?
For 2019, the Hudson Valley Textile Project has 2 main initiatives. And one of those is education. And we received a very generous contribution from one of our board members that has enabled us to retain a fantastic professional photographer, Gail Zucker, who folks may know that name from seeing her photos in the knitting magazines and elsewhere. Gail is just fabulous, and we are developing a series of posters and point of sale materials about the animals. Who are the farmers? What are the breeds? How are the breeds used? And where are they located? What does it look like in the Hudson Valley? And we've done 1 round of photo shoots in the late spring, and then first week of September, we're going to do the second round with her. So that's one of the 2 initiatives, big initiatives for the year of Hudson Valley Textile Project in education. We also helped a high school career and technical ed program get the funding to really build on their fashion. It's a fashion program to add farm to fashion. And that grant came from the New York Ag in the Classroom program that's enabling them to bring in some guest speakers to do field trips to farms and the mill and a weaving studio, and then also to do their capstone projects at the end of next school year, in which they're going to design and sew garments using locally sourced materials and locally woven yard goods. So just fabulous things in education. And then one that is all about you, and that is Gail has launched a podcast.
Oh,
yes.
She did. She finally did. Oh,
yes.
Yay. That's so exciting. Because I was just going to say, speaking of how we met, and I wanted to, talk about Gail, and it's amazing how you guys are so busy. I don't even know if you sleep, but so yeah, tell me, when is it? Did it launch? Give me more details.
Well, she's taped about a dozen episodes, and she and I just taped the intro episode 1 last week, and it's just fabulous what she's come up with. Thanks to our friend Catherine at Brooklyn General Store, we've named the podcast Thread Counts.
Oh, that's great. I love that name. That's great. Yeah, you guys.
And Gail is interviewing.
Yeah.
Gail is interviewing all of us that had breakfast in the New Paltz Diner as the first 6 of her 12, since we were all there with her from the beginning. But we couldn't have done it without you and that fabulous class we took at TNNA on how to be podcasters and also how to appear on podcasts. I learned that from you too. And just recently I was the guest on a podcast, and I don't think any of that would have happened without taking your class as well.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I just, I'm just really impressed by all that you've been doing. And I'm so happy to hear that Gail finally launched the podcast, because we met actually at TNNA a second time. And I kind of coached her and, tried to help her push her over the fence. And so now she's finally doing it. So I just love to help people, move the needle, so to speak, on their, just getting out there, getting out from behind the bushes, and promoting themselves on a podcast, because, that was the thing that the class that you took was how to actually pitch to get on a podcast, and such a powerful medium. And here you are on my podcast. So I just thought, you know what, let's just hop on a call together, because you can just kind of get more practice and also your mission, your vision, your purpose is huge. I mean, like I said before, this is beyond the business part, because we're all in business. We're in businesses because we really care about what we're doing, right? And you're offering such an amazing public service. I mean, really, I just think, and just to connect the community. And now with the Hudson Valley Textile Project, just meeting Gail, that was like serendipity. That was amazing. And by the way, you mentioned the New Paltz Diner. I had like a blast to the past, or blast to the past, I guess is the best way to say it, because, I'm from New York originally. I grew up in New Jersey, but, I lived in the city, and, I love the whole Hudson Valley. I lived in Hudson Valley for a little while, and I love New Paltz, and I love that diner. That is the best place. So I'm glad that you mentioned that and brought that up. That was awesome.
That's just really, you never know, I think is what this has all come around to. Yeah. When you get up in the morning and you're sitting there doing your yoga stretches, or you're knitting or drinking your tea, or whatever people do when they get up in the morning, you never know. And you ask me, well, what happens in the day in the life at the mill? And day after day looks and sounds pretty much the same. There's some farmers, there's some dyers, there's some yarn brand that you're working on, but you never can tell when one day there's a different voice on the phone and you've never heard that person before, and how that is going to be the beginning of a 10-year journey, a nonprofit with a board of directors and receiving grants. You absolutely never know what every day is going to bring and who you're going to meet that's going to lead you to your next big thing.
Oh my gosh, I know. And it's like just waking up and just being open, like being open to the wonder of the day. You know what I mean? Because I think that's how those things come into your life, especially when you're living on purpose and you're doing that thing that you know is really why you're here, why you're in business to begin with. And that's not to say that every day is like fairy dust and it's happy. Like you have those days where it's tough, but because you're doing the thing that you believe in, it makes it that much easier to get through to do it, right? To do it. And I just think that sometimes when people like Gail come into your life, or when I met you, I thought, oh my gosh, when I met you actually for the first time last year and with Gail, because you had, we were passing in the hallway at TNNA, and I just have a very special place in my heart for the Hudson Valley, no matter what. And I was like, we're going to meet again. I just knew it. And beyond this podcast, I'm telling you, you're gonna hear from me again. Just we're definitely gonna keep in touch for sure, because I'm just so thrilled with all that you're doing.
Oh, well, that's great that we
Yeah.
will. And I like that idea. And thank you for saying as much. And one thing we could work on that I think people listening to this right now, I want to say, and that is, you can do this too. If you think you have a story that's interesting, that could help other people, you should take the leap and reach out to podcasters, or reach out in whatever media that you feel comfortable with, and let those editors, let those hosts know who you are and what you're working on, because that's really, people love hearing real people's stories. It's so much more interesting. You think, oh, podcasting, that's for celebrities, or it's for people who are really good public speakers. Well, it's for everyone who has a passion and that wants to share it.
Oh, absolutely. And you inspired me, because I'm thinking, you know what? That class that I did at TNNA, like how to pitch to get on a podcast, I think I should just do an episode. Obviously it's not going to be like a 2-hour episode, but really just like the principles, like here are some ways that you can really get your feet wet. So I think that it's my responsibility to do that. So I think I'm going to do it. I'm excited.
You know what would be fun? We had some other really fabulous, my classmates, 3 or 4 of them and I are still in contact.
Oh, wow.
and Instagramming together. In fact, one of them is an indie dyer who wanted to share her story, and now I'm making some yarn for her that I met in your class.
Oh, wow.
So I think it'd be really interesting to just reach out to your students and see what they've done too.
Absolutely. And, I reached out, right after the class, but I definitely would love to, this is a good reminder to definitely get back, on the emails, on the Instagrams, and see what they're up to, because absolutely that is just amazing that you guys connected. Wow. Yeah. And, I wanted to mention one other thing, or ask you about one other thing before we sign off. Because I feel like I don't want to be all over the place. I feel like I am, because I have so many questions for you. But you also you offer retreats and tours. And I find that to be very intriguing, because I know that's become a big thing for knitters. And can you share just a little bit? And you mentioned in our pre-chat that this is something that you're really getting into. Could you just share a little bit about that, and then we can wrap up, and then, the listeners can learn more. But could you, just share a little bit about what you're doing in that respect?
So the purpose of our trips is not the same as some of the other knitting trips out there. It goes back to the very first knitting tour retreat that we did 15 years ago, when I started the first yarn store in Watkins Glen, New York. And that's purposeful travel, to understand the place and the culture that we're going to. It's not to bring a celebrity knitter with us to teach us a technique in a cool location. It's to sit in the church basement in Lerwick, on the Shetland Islands with not some celebrity, but with the ladies who knit there on Tuesday afternoons, and see their notebook of Shetland lace patterns drawn on graph paper from the lumber yard where their husband works, and brought them home a pad of paper, put in their kids' old 8th grade band folder. That's what we're looking for in our travel, is meeting those kind of people and having those kind of authentic participatory experiences. So our travel is very different, and it's sometimes a late night or an early morning in order to have that experience, to sit in a little fjord town in Western Norway with the gals that have come together and formed a 20-member cooperative to sell what they've woven and knitted when the big fjord cruise ships come ashore. The cruise ships, they come ashore for a minute, they look at the stuff, they get back on and go. We spend 2 nights in that town. We eat at the same restaurants the local people eat at, and then we sit and knit with them. In that case, we had to get us a translator, though. But by the end of 4 hours, you can talk about slip, slip, knit versus knit 2 together in any language.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just it. Even though it's not like, okay, we're going to knit and this is what the tour is about. It ties back to the local aspect, to the community. And it's still, it's like connecting the dots back to all that you do, to that same vision in your business. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
It certainly is. We're so excited for this year's tour. We're starting in Copenhagen and then going out from there in several directions, including up to northern Denmark, to have a class with Helena Zager to learn about that mill and how they're making yarn and what all they're doing with design concepts as well. So this group of gals and I are already very excited. We take off in about 2 months from now.
Oh, great! So it's one time a year. Is that?
It has been just once a year, every fall, roughly the week after Rhinebeck. One year we tried to go the 2 weeks before Rhinebeck, and I was a nervous wreck. But it was to New Mexico, and we needed to go because we wanted to go at the time of the Taos Sheep and Wool Festival, and so that only comes once a year. But that's one reason why when we did go to Shetlands, we didn't go for Wool Week. We went after Wool Week because I don't like being away right before Rhinebeck. But some year we'll go when it is Wool Week, just because I'd love to see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So listeners can learn more about that on your website pretty easily, right? So that's what I'm going to ask you next, to share all the goodness, like where people can learn more about you.
Sure. Yeah. So all our trips are posted on Battenkill Fibers with an S, battenkillfibers.com. And folks they just follow me on Instagram. I'm just me, MJ Packer. Nothing tricky there, just MJ Packer. And you can see what I'm up to, if it's knitting a sweater for my granddaughter or helping my partner in our maple syrup farm, or spinning some beautiful, unusual fiber for one of our farm customers. I just kind of post it all, whatever's exciting to me that day, so that people can follow along.
Yeah, I have to say your website is packed with lots of good information. So like on the sidebar, it's lots of good stuff. So yeah, everybody listen or read what's there. It's great. It's a great place. So yeah, this is awesome, Mary Jeanne. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it was fun, and thank you so much for making me part of your podcast community.
If you're struggling with your fiber business or yarn shop and you need some direction, then let's set up a free 30-minute coaching session so you can get some clarity on your goals. You'll also get a taste of what it's like to work with me in a more formal way, and I'll share more details about my Rock Your Shop coaching program, which will help you get more peeps in your LYS or online shop. So let's set up a time together and let's crush your goals. Go to karagottwarner.com/coach with Kara.